Hello, everybody. It's the Space King Scott, and today I am joined by
Nana.
my partner in crime on this channel. They make
Is
all
that
the
what you
art.
want to call it?
Yeah, sure. So, it is 3 in the morning. At 9 in the morning, there's supposed to be a Xenoblade X trailer, or at least
Wait, really?
that's what we've been led to believe by leakers. So, um, I'm doing this right now, and I'm gonna upload it like right after this, in order to get all of the shit that we will inevitably be wrong about down right now. Sorry for the haphazard format, but this is how we have to do this.
Why do you keep doing things last minute? Gotta
Well,
stop.
it wasn't that it was last minute. It's just that my life has been terrible this last month and a half. So, just off the cuff on account of the fact that we're likely getting news very quickly. This is going to be our hopes for what a remaster of Xenoblade X could improve on the experience and what it could look like to elevate it from its current niche status to a lesser entry in the franchise, how it's perceived, but bringing it up to code of the numbered titles on the Switch. This video is going to be divided in a couple of segments. First segment will just be like the stuff that we kind of expect. Then there's stuff that's like it's a bit of a moonshot, but we like it. And then at the end there will be story spoilers discussions. So yeah. First things first is the graphics. For my notes here, I penned down that I'd like it if the game could hit 1080p 30 FPS, or if maybe even just having an option to do 900p 60. People have experimented with that on the CMU emulator. Uh, hard to say how that would pan out in reality. Uh,
Widescreen Xenoblade X is very cursed.
what do you mean?
I've seen it on Twitter. Somebody had Xenoblade X like on a wide screen and it actually looks kind of great. It's just kind of cursed to look at it.
21 by 9, you mean?
Yeah, it looks like it works perfectly fine. It's just I'm not used to seeing it like that.
The paper math of how much more powerful the Switch is than the Wii U is kind of difficult to parse, but like if you just go by flops, the Wii U GPU was 350 G flop. Docked, the Switch is about 400. That's not a lot. Like they're really stretching to try and do the best that they can with the processing power that they have. Room for improvement is limited, but I'm hopeful that they could pull some cool things off because they're working with a much more refined version of the engine by now. Would have suggested improvements to the character models, but we're already getting that, thankfully. Concerning the Switch 2, it sounds like that even in the absolute worst case scenario, like nightmare territory of how bad it could be, um, it's supposed to be like at the bare minimum like a PS4 in terms of performance, which is actually still much more powerful than the current Switch. Uh, it could probably be possible to jack up the visuals and performance, possibly to 1440p at 60 FPS if they use the DLSS feature, which is heavily rumored. So even in like a worst case scenario, we're looking at like a system that is like 5 times stronger than the Switch. So Monolith Soft is obviously going to take advantage. As for how they're going to do the release format, I think they should just keep it simple. Just release it as a Switch game, but then like advertise the fact that if you play the game on Switch 2, it'll look and run better. And that could work for sales because early adopters of Switch 2, they're going to be looking for games. They might just pick up Xenoblade X because it'll be right there near the beginning, and it's an RPG, a big RPG it's perfectly positioned to be adopted by any new people coming in for the first time. Next up is what we hope for with the combat interface. And, okay. The way I'm doing this, by the way, is that I have uh, pictures that I have very painstakingly grabbed over the course of the last hour in order to have something for you people to look at while this is being hashed out. But basically, uh, we would want something like the Xenoblade uh, Definitive Edition user interface, because that was heavily cleaned up and a lot more user friendly. Marking when you would have the ability to get advantage and bonus effects off just on the attacks themselves, and making the icons simple enough to understand. At bare minimum, I'd like to see a repeat of what was done with the combat menu in Xenoblade 1 Definitive. And so that would like making arts marked with their opportunity, and just in general a more readable, more understandable user interface. The moonshot version of this request would be to map arts to the face buttons and D-pad buttons like they do in Xenoblade 3, because I think that that's the best controlling entry in the series. But I don't really expect that. They didn't do that for Xenoblade 1 Definitive Edition. I don't really expect them to for XDE. I think they'll just have the arts palette. How do you what do you have to say on this or anything?
I don't want them to completely change it. I'm just saying, just make it readable.
Because as is, we have where's this image? Where is the image? What the heck? Oh, there it is. Right there. Uh, this is a bit messy. You have that big ass compass, which probably should be turned off in combat, as well as the clock. You have a tag because you have to go into a battle menu to pull up extra commands. Underneath the compass is like camera controls and shit, which that just shouldn't be on the screen. You have the HP and TP signifiers, and they're like near the middle. They should probably be closer to the top left. Uh, then you have like written descriptions of every art on the bottom, which is like a bit much. You have the position gauge, which like every well, I shouldn't say every. Xenoblade 1DE and 3 came up with a much better, more elegant way to depict that. Soul voices can take up a decent portion of the screen. And then you have the targeting reticle for enemy body parts. And below the enemy HP bar, you have the buffs and debuffs that they have, which that should probably be to the right or left side of it, not but underneath it. Uh, yeah, this is. I mean, it's acceptable. I mean, it functioned. People played it and enjoyed it, but it's just not very readable, not very easy to parse. Like it's a lot of layered information, and it's understandable why it is like people look at this and say, "What the fuck am I looking at?" Because
There's that, but it's also X's just general really small like
text,
text.
yeah,
So even when I try to read like what the effects do, it just like not only do I not have the time to do that, I also just I just can't read it,
do you think
which
the
adds to the time.
do you think the combat would benefit from a pause button?
Not really. I
Mm,
don't think any of the games have that.
they don't. I was just bringing it up
It's not
because
necessary.
a thought that I had was how in Final Fantasy VII Remake series, when you pull up your magic meter, the game pauses.
No, I don't really want that for Xenoblade specifically. It works for other series. I don't think it really works that well for Blade.
That's fair. It's
And plus,
Xenoblade's combat is very
if you want to pause it, just hit the home menu. It's not hard.
it's kind of strange how Xenoblade's combat, like it has elements of turn-based combat in it because all the attacks are on cooldown, but like it's also got elements of action because like you're moving around in 3D space to position yourself. But it also has that MMO element to it where like you're just hacking away at enemies and they're not really reactive that much to what you're doing. It's kind of like, just how the series is constructed at this point. So like changing that could be a bit too controversial in any meaningful capacity.
I'm going to say controversial is just like what changed. What that wasn't. Why try to change something that wasn't really broken?
Yeah, yeah. Next up is quest tracking. Uh,
Please.
Jesus Christ. Uh, this is one of the biggest problems with Xenoblade X, because like you see here, like go find some pearls in Primordia. Okay, but where are the pearls? It's in Primordia. Where are the pearls?
I think there was a quest, and I think this was like one of the first quests they did when I booted up the game.
I forgot to turn on the music this whole time. I'm stupid.
I think what happened was that I was going insane because I spent 5 hours trying to look for it.
Mm-hmm.
And by this point, I had already looked it up, so I knew where to look. The issue was that I just didn't know where exactly the location was, which added to the time. And there were multiple instances where it's like that, be it an enemy or items I have to look in overworld. It's just very tedious
This was
and
a
not fun.
this was a problem in the first Xenoblade game, and mind you, that's kind of understandable because Xenoblade One has kind of some rough edges about it. That's like, yeah, this was the first time that they were trying to make a game like this, but they fixed that in Xenoblade Definitive Edition with the improved quest tracking, which I can pull up a picture of right now. If if I can find it. Where is it? This folder isn't that populated with crap. Here, okay. Yeah, so like here, this is how quest tracking works in this game. Like in Xenoblade 1 DE, they just tell you where the stuff is on the minimap. And like if enemies have drops that you need for quests, the enemies are just marked on the compass. And like if you're looking for generic collectibles for quests, the items are just marked on the compass. This is the way that it should be
I
for
don't
every
remember
game.
it being marked on the compass, but you can definitely see it in the overworld. It'll be like marked with like a blue exclamation mark.
Like, yeah, so like this is probably just how it should be. This problem is like way worse in Xenoblade X than 1 though, because Xenoblade 1's worlds, they're big, but they're not like ridiculously big. Xenoblade X's worlds are ridiculously big, the biggest worlds in the series. So, like, if they just tell you to go find the hay in the needle stack, it's just a nightmare.
Agony. 5 hours of agony. I will never get back.
Next up is we need to improve the drop rates. I'm gonna pull something up.
This
Real
is
quick.
something I can't really like comment too much on because I never really had issues with the drop rates, but for people who probably are trying to get very specific builds, yeah, I can see how that much ends up being a problem, especially when it comes to making augments.
This is the Dark God Sword, which is the special weapon that the final boss drops. But you have to do it in a challenge battle, and like you have to do it over and over and over again to get it to drop, which is stupid. There should probably be like ways to like increase drop rate of stuff, or just in general, just make good items just drop more frequently, because you need that if you want to do like specialized builds for the online segments of the game. But more importantly is the fact that Xenoblade X doesn't have gravestones, so you can refight unique monsters. And as a result of that, you're at the mercy of the RNG for when this monster might respawn. So, yeah, like this goes hand in hand. They should make the drops better, but if they're not going to, then they should implement gravestones. I don't think they did in Xenoblade 1 DE, which I don't know why they didn't. It was stupid, because like 2 and 3 had it.
I think it did happen. I don't know. I haven't played the game in like years by this point. I could have sworn it did.
For the next discussion piece, I present to you a meme from the Xenoblade Reddit. So, next up is the tutorialization. Because...
what tutorials?
What tutorials? What tutorials? Alright, so Xenoblade X's tutorial is somehow arguably worse than 2's, because the game figured out the game had a digital manual. Like, that's just a feature that Wii U games have. Like, you pull up a digital instruction booklet that tells you what you need to do to play the game. And this is actually informative, and this is where a lot of the information is. But 95% of the people playing the game didn't know that that was a thing that existed. And on Switch, there is no digital manual feature. So, like, there's no excuse. You can't, like, just have what you had before and expect people to understand the game. That's not going to work. The character advice system, like, I don't think you could review that information, first of all, so it's like the Xenoblade 2 problem, but also, like, it was badly conveyed to the player because, like, oh, here's overdrive. Okay, how do I use overdrive? We don't know. Which is why it is a lot of players had to go, like, on the internet to figure out how to actually understand and play the game. That's just not acceptable, obviously. That needs to be fixed.
Xenoblade 2 had too many tutorials, and Xenoblade X has no tutorials.
Xenoblade 2 had tutorials that gave you bad advice. I'd also like them to go a step further, like they did with Xenoblade 3. Xenoblade 3 has, like, a virtual trainer mode that will take you step by step through basically every mechanic of the combat mechanics. I think
it would make sense in hindsight, because this is a like, you're in the military, you have to kind of train for this kind of stuff. So maybe just added like a new area, a new ally, where it's just a training facility. Make new LA bigger. Just a wee bit.
Next up is the user interface.
Fix it.
It's
for the love of God, it's so tiny.
It's a mess. Less cluttered, please. XEX allows you to clean up some of the menus with small changes here or there, but it's not enough. What the game really needs is a total visual overhaul in this department. Text is too small, especially on the Wii U gamepad, which the Switch's screen is basically the same size, although it's 720p versus 480p, but still. Menus are nested within other menus. There are things that are often unclear. Most players are going to spend a sizable portion of the early game trying to understand what the hell it is they're even looking at. Just like I was during my, initial playthrough. The whole experience is just kind of a mess. No, it's a criticism of 1DE that its menus, like, kind of pivoted too hard in the other direction. That they're, like, more bland now. But that just doesn't matter. Give me blandness if it means that that, it'll be functional. Give me form. Excuse me. Give me function over form, please. This is a smaller complaint, but like it adds up over the course of an experience with this game, which is that the in-game like outposts that you can end up in. Also, this is the world's like most compressed image I've ever seen in my life. Holy crap! But the outposts are where you have to go in order to change the clock. Why? There are so many quests in this game that like need to be visited and done at specific times of the day, and like Xenoblade 1 just lets you wait till whenever. Why can't I just have this be the case in
Don't
X?
really understand why you say that this is a smaller gripe. This is actually a very important gripe. If you're going to have a game that a lot of the side quests are going to rely on like time and weather, you're kind of gonna need to have that clock be readily available.
Yeah. So I think there needs to be a compromise here. So like, give us the ability to change the clock on a dime, but like maybe for these outposts so they're still relevant, like you could have something else. Like maybe you go to these outposts throughout the land, and then when you arrive at one, like it'll be useful because like you'll be able to, I don't know, like work on your Skell inventory and like who has what equipped, and like if you broke a Skell, like you could cash in insurance at these places. That way,
Yeah,
these things
Poppy,
still
you
have
remember?
these things still have value, right? Without like getting in the way of a central gameplay mechanic. That would also like solve the problem of Skell stuff, where like you just have to, if you lose your Skells, you just instantly have to go back to NLA because like otherwise you'll die. Next up is uh, stat explanations. Because
How can I read the stats when I can't see them?
okay, so here's a screenshot off of the Xenoblade wiki, because there aren't good pictures for a lot of these, but the important thing here is that the game doesn't really convey to you what stats are worth going for and what stats aren't worth going for. What most players are going to think, because it's an RPG, is that you should go for the defense stat. Because, like, the stat is, like, like, how tough your character is. Defense is, like, really important in most RPGs. It's not at all important in this game. What matters more is attribute resistances to the various elements of attack, as well as potential, because potential is like where you get heals off of soul voices and like just listening to your party members' commands. So like potential and attribute resistance is way more important for survivability than defense. Defense literally just deducts the total amount of your defense score from the attack total number from an attack. There's no percentage. There's no, like, multiplication going on. It is literally a one-to-one deduction. Like, that's, like, so useless. And there's no way for a normal person who's not reading the in-game instruction manual, which, again, won't be a thing because it's not a feature on the Switch, for you to understand how important this is. So this needs to be fixed. Absolutely. Next up is another Uh, one that I don't have a good picture for, but we will make do, which is field skills. Uh, Field skills did not originate in Xenoblade 2. They originated in XCX. Well, here's the thing about field skills in Xenoblade Chronicles X. Archaeological and biological are useless. Practically. You need mechanical, because it's through mechanical that, like, you can get mechanical material throughout the world. And why would you want that? Well, it's because those mechanical materials are one of the only ways that you can get data probes, and you need data probes to work on Frontier Nav and the Mimira survey rate. Without that, you can't really meaningfully progress your overworld progress in order to get to your next few, like, main story quests. So if you invest too much in biological or archaeological by mistake, you're just going to get to a point where it's almost practically impossible to progress the story without, like, doing an absolute crap load of standard quests in LLA. And so, like, some players will be, like, taking too long to get to from point A to point B of the story, and they'll be wondering why, and this is one of the major contributing reasons why. Because the game presents all three field skills, like they're worth investing in, when they're really not. You need to get as many points into mechanical as fast as possible. Ignore the other two, and the game needs to be clear about this. So here's how I would do this. The first time you get to upgrade a field skill, I would say that Eleonora should just force you to pick mechanical for the first one so that you understand its importance. Also, I do believe you need certain mechanical levels in order to just place data probes in some locations.
Yeah, yes.
So that's even more important. So this is how you get data probes. You can't buy those at the store. This is how you get data probes. This is how you work on reclaiming stuff. This is how it is you expand Frontier Nav. This is like one of the most important systems in the game, and it's explained very, very poorly in the game. Honestly, if it was up to me, I would change how this works entirely. I would say that, like, you just upgrade mechanical based on your progress, and then, like, just make archaeological and biological upgrade via side quests or story progress. I don't know. I think there's a more elegant solution here than what's already available. How do you feel?
Uh, I think it should be just like a reward for progressing through the story, other than just like the money.
So you think that it should be that way so that, like, you don't get screwed for, like,
Yeah, because
progress?
when I played through the game, I didn't get all the field skills, at least minus like the level 5 one, until like well into the post game. That's how long it would typically take. It would take about as long as it would to get to the post game of the game.
Mm-hmm. So that's
That's
definitely an
way,
issue.
that's way too long.
Next up is an issue that Nana knows very well, which is how this game handles party comp. So, like, basically, the game forces you to have Elma and Lynn in your party for, like, almost all of the story missions. And it makes a degree of sense. It makes a degree of sense because, like, they are main characters that majorly contribute to the story. Okay, that makes sense. But, like, the problem is that when you want to work on any of the other characters, you have to physically go to this person in NLA, go into the menu, add them to your party, and then rinse and repeat to add other people. That's stupid.
Incredibly repetitive, and it takes a lot of time, especially if you don't know exactly where they are.
Yeah,
And then
that's
there are times in which like a heart to heart will be active, and then you really don't know where they are.
yeah, that's just stupid. Just add the character that's relevant that you want to your party from a feature in the main menu. Why do you have to go visit them? Like, okay, I can understand visiting them in person the first time to like unlock
Excuse me.
them, but like doing this every single time, it's just facepalm worthy. It's just facepalm worthy. Who thought that was a good idea?
To still talk about the party members, I think there needs to be an alternative way to deal with affinity. Um, Actually, let me backtrack a little bit. The leveling is a big issue because because the levels stay more or less the same when you recruit them or whenever you last left them, or so you could be like level 50, and then when you go to grab like say Fry, he's going to be at level 30, maybe even 20 if you don't use him.
Yeah, that's a problem.
So the levels need to be like matched so that it'll give players more incentive to use the other character.
Or at the bare minimum, have a compromise. Like maybe they don't get 100% EXP, maybe they get 50% EXP while they're outside of the party. Just something, man.
And when it comes to the heart to hearts, uh, after a while, grinding for affinity wasn't bad per se,
I feel
but that
like
was because I got used to it. I think there needs to be an alternative way to gain affinity with your party members.
gifting
I just
items.
feel like, yeah, gifting items is a thing that needs to come back because you can gain affinity of one of like I think two ways. Wait, three ways. One is getting the correct answer in a heart to heart. The second one is answering a question in a way that they would probably like in a side quest or an affinity mission. And the other one is through battling, which is probably the most inefficient way. So you kind of have to balance between these three, and it makes grinding for some of these a bit of a slog. I think the only one that isn't bad is like Nagi because he's relatively quick to get four hearts.
I think that the affinity grind through battle would be a lot easier to achieve if the player had more of an active incentive to actively use the other characters, which they do not, because again, you have to go physically visit them in the other overworld to add them, which is stupid. If you could just add them to the party from a menu seamlessly, then like affinity wouldn't be so bad because like you could just use them whenever you want to.
I think another thing before we continue, because like I keep remembering, I've had multiple instances where I straight up just couldn't recruit the party member because their heart to heart was active. If their heart to heart is active, you straight up can't use them. So if you needed to like do an affinity mission with them,
They should mark it on the map where the heart to heart is.
yeah, that's another big one. But the fact that you can't recruit them at all when their heart to heart is active, because there are times in which the heart to heart will be active at any time, which means you can't get them at all until you do it.
Does that also apply to Elma and Lynn?
I believe so, yes.
Oh, so that means that you could end up in a situation where you need to do a heart to heart with Elma or Lynn, but you can't recruit them to the party on account of the fact that you need to have them so that you can't. So you could theoretically, if you don't remember where Elma or Lynn are, which I mean, I do believe they're just in the barracks, so that's not a huge problem.
Depends on which one it is,
But
but I think the like first or and fifth ones are in the barracks.
anyways, so like that's not like a that's like but anyways, it's like the fact that like you could end up progress blocks because you don't know where the hell they are in the overworld to do a heart to heart is just dumb. It's just
The
dumb.
only reason why I was able to like get through it was because I had guides, but sometimes like with how Xenoblade X like keeps track of its data because people didn't like going through it, I can tell. The
The online information
progress
is poor.
Yeah, it's very it made tracking some of these people really, really hard, and that included at least like for us, the DLC members are not marked at all. So if they're just gone, you're just fucked with that kind of information. You're at the mercy of the people online.
Oh
They're just straight
yeah,
up
this
not
is.
dead.
Oh yeah, this isn't a very well-known thing by the American community, but like a decent number of this roster were DLC in Japan only. You see, us in the West, we paid $60 on our Wii U and we got the whole game. But in Japan, that wasn't the case. Some of these guys were sold later after release as DLC. Now, I pretty safely assume that for Definitive Edition, that all of that stuff will just be included, because why wouldn't it? But if that is not the case in Japan, that is a facepalm. No, just include everything because you did in the Western version anyways.
I think it was another thing. Um for the most part, affinity missions were marked on the map. And again, this had to deal with the fact that these characters are DLC. If you wanted to look for their affinity missions and the character just so happens to be a DLC character, they're not going to be marked on the minimap at all. You're at the mercy once again.
That's a DLC implementation fail.
Yeah, if you wanted to know where these guys are exactly, you were at the mercy of the internet.
Of the roster, who all was DLC? I know that HB was.
HB, Murderous,
I knew that one.
Alexa, Bose, Yelv.
Gotcha. I knew that Yelv was as well.
Yeah, I think those are the ones. Basically, the entire, like, almost the entire, like, bottom row of the roster that you have right there. I think the only exceptions is Nagi, Hope, and Mia.
Celica?
Oh, yeah, Salika, too. I didn't see her. My eyes.
Next up is one that most players of Xenoblade 1 or 2 or even 3, they'll get to this game and they'll be like, WTF? Which is, I very elegantly named this picture this asshole, I think. Where is it?
Tiny.
The most compressed image known to man.
The enemy aggro. Everybody's favorite.
Okay, so lower the enemy aggro distance.
For the love of God, like you have to leave the area code for
it makes
for them to stop bothering you.
it makes sense in lore why it is the way that it is. Like, you're at the bottom of the food chain on an alien planet that has a completely different biological and evolutionary history than you. Like, they're pissed off, they're territorial, it's like a goddamn dinosaur land, alright? It makes sense. But it's not fun.
It's they straight up just don't do this in the other games. It doesn't make sense, so just please.
Enemies will aggro on you, and then they will chase you halfway across the continent practically. And the thing is, I know that this can be fixed. How do I know that this can be fixed? Well, my third playthrough of the game was via the CMU emulator. In the CMU emulator, this is a cheat code that people made that allows you to decrease enemy aggression distance. A cheat code had it. I'm sure that they could fix this in the freaking remake.
Fitting music that's playing in the background.
We
Yeah,
sound
but
like we hate this game, but no, we don't.
we don't. It's just it has a bunch of problems that are just really strange, especially if you're playing. If you were one of those people who played 1 first and then go straight to X and everything is just kind of wrong. Because, like, even the enemy aggro in the first game was not nearly as bad. And I'm talking about, like, Wii. Wii Xenoblade 1. I played X first and then played Xenoblade 1, and I realized that the enemies weren't nearly as aggressive.
Yeah, definitely a problem that needs to be considered and thought about. Next up is another image that I don't have a good picture for. Experience points.
Yeah, this is something I was talking about earlier with the party members. Um, if you were like just grinding on your own, you'll be at like level 15 while everybody else is still at level 5. That's just kind of annoying, especially when you have to deal with like how many party members now?
4.
Not 4. I'm talking about like in total, how many party members, like recruitable party members that you have at it. Just, pull up the
18.
image again.
18.
18. Yeah, you gotta juggle like 18 different characters, including yourself, and you can't take yourself out of the party. So, and you only have 4 slots. So you have to at least go back at least like 3 other times to get all those party members up to a usable level.
Another thing is that this game doesn't have. Well, okay, it does kind of have a way to get EXP fast, but it's not anywhere near as effective as the overkill mechanic from 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
Overkill would like like practically guarantee that you're the level that you need to be to get to the story. But
And
this game
even
has Overdrive, and Overdrive does have an EXP multiplier. But the thing is that in order to get a good Overdrive going, you need to know how to use Overdrive. And in order to know how to use Overdrive, you have to be pretty dang far into the game in order to have an effective build going. So it's just not a very good way of building EXP in the mid game. It's only good in the late game, and by the time you're in the late game, you're like late 40s, early 50s in levels. You're almost at the end of the level scale. It's pointless at that point, practically.
and there's not like what makes Xenoblade 1 and 2, and I won't count 3 because you could have basically every party member possible just out in a battle. But Xenoblade 1 and 2, like the other party members are still getting EXP even if they're not in battle. That's the big difference. That's the key. That's the key right there. You need to have the EXP shared amongst all of them, even the ones that you're not using.
Right.
Because otherwise, people are not going to want to fuck with any of the other characters. They'll probably have the one that they're super attached to, and that's the only one that they're using for the entire game, at least until the story tells them that they're not available.
And that probably contributes to people thinking that Xenoblade X has a bad story. It doesn't really have a bad story. It's a very character-driven experience, but you wouldn't know that because the game's systems are kind of structured in a fashion that dissuades you from using other party members.
Yeah, and it's like Lynn and Elmer are very clearly the main characters, so you already know as much as you could possibly know about those two. But if you wanted more lore in regards to what's going on with the actual game itself, you have to play with the other party members and do their affinity missions, which require that you have to use them, but they're going to
Yeah,
just keep dying. And so it's like it makes everything harder.
more than half of this game's story is just in side quests.
Side quests and affinity missions, yeah.
It's kind of like
Um,
almost like a Souls game in that respect, with how much stuff is not in like major cutscenes.
yeah. And another thing, this kind of goes into the whole experience point thing. Please make a faster way to gain points for your classes. Please.
All right.
I don't I don't like grinding for it.
Next up is Heart to Heart. This is like, alright, we're kind of crossing the point where I'd say that these are things that are essential, and we're now kind of in the nice to have category. For this, first things first, I would like it. I'm not counting on it, but I would like it if it were somehow possible to have all of the Heart to Hearts be voiced. It's probably a
Yes.
lot to add to the game, but it would be nice.
I think Xenoblade 2 is the only one with like voice heart to hearts.
Well, 3 doesn't even have Heart to Hearts. It just has
No,
campfire
well,
conversations.
which to be honest, I kind of wish they just had heart to hearts. It feels very strange that it's the only one that doesn't have that. Don't try to fix what wasn't broken. Yeah, but Xenoblade 1's Heart to Hearts were never voiced. Xenoblade 2 is the only game with Heart to Hearts that is voiced, and I don't understand why it wasn't like that for Definitive. That shit actually kind of shocked me.
They said that they would need a really high budget to do XCX remaster. Well, clearly they got the really high budget, so
Yeah,
use
Xenoblade
it.
3 probably sold really fucking well.
Well, it was. As far as we're led to believe, 2 is the best-selling game in the series at like 2.7 million, and then 1DE is at like 1.9, and then I think 2DE is like right there at the same level. So like both 1DE and 3 are about to cross over to 2 million. Although that was over a year ago, so they're both probably well over 2 million by now. We do have the total Xenoblade series sales on the Switch. I think it's like 7,500,000 or something like that Nintendo shared. Alright. Next up is... this acquiring a Skell. This game is heavily designed in mind with you having a Skell. It's very odd then that you don't get your Skell until beating Chapter 6, which is like 40% of the game or more.
There's 12 chapters, so that's already halfway.
Well, I mean, I'm saying 40% because this game backloads its story pretty hard. But, like, yeah. I would like it if they could just push your Skell acquisition forward by one chapter. Just one more. Right? Because then I feel like 5 chapters is more than enough time to establish most, if not all, of the central on-foot gameplay mechanics. And then you'd have your Skell a bit sooner, and it would feel like you get to use it for just a bit longer of a time period. Now, mind you, depending on how they do their additional content, this could change. Like, for example, let's say they just add, I don't know, 3 new main story chapters, and they lower
Yeah,
the
I was
level
about to
cap
talk
to
about that.
80 or something like that. What?
I was going to start talking about that. It's like I don't really know if I like the idea of them changing when you get the like scale. What I would be more willing to accept is if they added more story chapters.
I don't know. I've thought about this one back and forth. I think that it would just ultimately be a good idea to get you in your Skell a bit faster. That's just how I feel. Especially considering it was like literally the main draw of the game. Next up is another nice to have. I don't have a good image for this. We should probably have something in form of a music setting. So, like, people were complaining about this during Xenoblade 3, that you couldn't turn off certain songs. The poster child of Xenoblade X's music is unfortunately the NLA Light Night theme, which is people consider infamously terrible. They like this is genuinely a reason why it is that this game gets laughed at on certain game forums. Um, it's not a terrible song in my opinion, but I think that you should be able to do stuff like turn off certain songs and or change the frequency of appearance, or hell, just even have an in-game option for a radio or something like that, so you could just listen to whatever song you want to. Xenoblade X does kind of have the music problem in general, though, because when you go into your Skell, you have the Skell flight theme. When you go into Overdrive, you have the Overdrive battle theme. When you get like chased down, you have like the goddamn aggressive enemy music. Uh, you see here, it's like there's like moments where music overrides other music, so I feel like just having some settings would be a good thing. Just be an easy win for people that don't like certain aspects of the musical presentation.
I think speaking of the music, there needs to be something done about the audio mixing. I love listening to this really awesome music while in the middle of a lore important scene.
It's not as terrible as the mixing in 2, but it isn't very good.
At least in 2 you can like change the audio.
That wasn't added until an update.
Well, I wasn't there day 1, thankfully, but still.
This image is so elegantly titled, "You son of a bitch." Because next up is another nice to have, which is an online expansion. So we have 2 global nemesis, and we have like several dozen blade quests that you can go on in multiplayer. I think that a lot more people are going to be playing this. The game might be running for a longer playtime. They should add multiple new global nemesis. They should add several dozen new quests to do online. And I know this is a moonshot, but what I would really like is if there was somehow a way for 4 players to meet up together and explore Mira in, I guess, single player, or at least the story mode, together. To me, that would be really, really cool. I'm not sure how much of that is possible, but the game did go under very significant changes and rewrites in order to accommodate online. So I feel like they should go very hard on online.
I guess have like a Scarvo kind of like mode, because you can't do that in Scarlet and Violet. It's just not. I would hope it's not nearly as buggy.
Next up is another nice to have, which is fix whatever this is.
Oh my god, dude. I listen, I would love to be able to like read through all the individual like little like interactions and shit that would change over time. But how am I supposed to go through that when not only is the text stupidly tiny, but I also can't find the specific person on the map? Like
Yeah, this.
do it like how you did with Xenoblade 3, where everybody has like a different like segment or something.
This Affinity chart is a train wreck, but I was going to use this as a discussion piece for Affinity in general. I feel like if we solve the party swap problem, we do, as a consequence, somewhat solve the Affinity distribution problem. But also, this chart is a train wreck. It needs to be reworked.
Please. It's like it's such a small issue with what I was discussing, but compared to the other games, like they do it so much better. I don't understand why this one is so bad.
Next up is another very simple one. We should probably have the ability to edit the game controls. But also, this is the game that is the most closest to an MMO. So, maybe they should just add keyboard and mouse support. Map arts to certain keys on the keyboard, stuff like that. Just do it like you would in an MMO. That way you could like message other players very simply with text. And also, you know, just be an easy point of entry for people that are familiar with games like FF14. Seems simple, but, you know, it's a nice to have. And, looks like with almost an hour on the clock, we have finally
I
arrived at story points of discussion.
um, hmm. I actually do have a point to make because I don't know where this would fit.
Go for it.
Um, I love experiencing the story. It is a damn shame, however, that I can't rewatch the cutscenes.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
obviously an events theater. This is just a series standard feature now. This is in 2, this is in Torna, this is in uh 1DE, this is in Future Connected, this is in 3, this is in Future Redeemed. This will obviously be in XDE. No questions asked. That's a no-brainer. Obviously, you're gonna have an events viewer. Like it was so much of a foregone conclusion for me that I didn't even list it out. But yeah, we should have it.
yeah, no, it was just jarring because I like one of my favorite cutscenes in the game was like Nagi just being a complete badass, and when you like it was him getting ready to fuck some shit up, and then Elma and Cross ended up joining that entire the scene was just cinema. It was peak cinema. I loved it, and I had to record it on my phone just to experience it again. Another one, it's like getting your Skell for the first time. That one was also another peak moment. It just felt really nice.
All
It's
right,
just it's strange.
all right. At 1 hour, not 1 hour. At 56 minutes, going on 57, we're gonna enter spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled, now is
Hell,
the skip to the end. All right.
you're gonna need to put a timestamp.
Next up, this son of a bitch. Who are you? Who the fuck are you?
In regards to like the possible story expansion, it's very obviously going to address what the fuck happened to Lao.
As well as the Black Knight.
Yeah, but with what it was showing at the end of that very first trailer where we all got jump scared, it was very clearly mostly about what was going on with Lao, because Lao was like the biggest outlier. Even in his affinity chart, it listed that he was just like his whereabouts are unknown, not dead, just straight up unknown. So that led to a plethora of probably like a dozen billion theories. Oh right, I forgot the ending. I completely forgot the ending cutscene. They just straight up just spoiled that entire thing in that cut in that trailer.
Well, it's no longer the last cutscene.
Yeah, yeah. Regardless. Um, what I want is I want a prequel DLC listing what happened with Elma, because the closest thing that we got to like what was going on with Elma was in her final Affinity mission, and you briefly see like what it was like for her when she stepped on Mira for the first time. She got attacked and she lost her teammates at the time. You even see like her red scale. I think you could craft it too. But I want to know what's going on with Elma. I want to know more about her past because we don't really get much outside of like bits and pieces of material. And
Well,
obviously, if we're going to know more about Elma, we gotta know more about the Black Knight because it's very clear that that might have been her partner, or at least he was on one of like he was at least on her team.
so the Black Knight. There are lots of theories about him. Is he the Great One that Luxar keeps mentioning? Is he Ganglion? Is he a ghost? Is he human? Is he Sumerian? Is he like Mobius? Is he like a Testament? Is he the lone hero? If he's the lone hero, then obviously he's no longer dead. And if he's no longer dead, well, then that's pretty relevant for Lao because Lao just freaking died, and now here he is, and here's the Black Knight who's rolling up to him like, oh, I lived. Okay. Time, is it Mobin time? Is that what this is? And,
I think a lot of that kind of gets answered because of how Lao was addressed too. Because, like, that cloaked figure has to be the Black Knight, right?
People have data mined it on the Wii U version. Yeah, the character model is pretty dang close to the art book art. It's the Black Knight.
Okay, but with how he addressed it, it's as if he already knew him before, and Lao
Fancy
was
meeting you
there.
here is what he said.
Huh?
He said, fancy meeting you here.
Yeah, it's very clear he knows him already, so it has to be it has to be the lone hero. Maybe he didn't die. Maybe he was just kind of just lost for a hot minute.
What I personally want myself for the expansion is I just want new main story chapters. So the game ends at chapter 12. Can you, like, I don't know, make it go to, I don't know, chapter 16? Just make this story feel like it ends more conclusively.
It probably will. By this point.
I feel like if it was just like future connected, that they would have just said so. Oh, here's a new campaign, because like they implied that at the end of the initial Xenoblade Definitive trailer. But this looks like something different, in my opinion. Like a different format for how they'll handle this. Which makes sense, a degree of sense to me, because Xenoblade X's story was just unfinished from the start. I feel like segmenting a whole part of the game off and like having like a different, you know, leveling and a different feature set would just be kind of strange. Especially considering like this game has online functionality, so like how would the online functionality interact with the different campaign, if at all? You know, one funny observation though is that this Xenoblade X ends at level 60. Future Connected starts at level 60. It's kind of just a funny observation I made a long time ago. Anyways, next up, you largely talked about this already, kind of out of order, but
I mean, you can't not talk about him without talking about Elma. Though,
who are you, Elma? Who are you, really?
I think it's so funny that she doesn't say anything about her past outside of, like, a heart-to-heart.
Mm-hmm.
So she mentions that she had a cat, and it's like, oh, okay. And then turns out she's an alien. Like, wait, did you lie about the fucking cat? Like, no, she was just living on Earth for a hot minute for like 30 years. So she had to like be accustomed to like a human body to like disguise herself, probably not to freak out. Oh my god, this song, not to freak out the public and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's just like there's so much and so little that we know about.
The thing is, the first time we actually learned something about her, it invalidated everything we already knew.
And the only time where it felt as though she was being 100% truthful was in her final Affinity mission, where I think it was called Then and Now, where she talks about her old team. She even encountered the beast that ended up killing them.
So I have a funny story to share here about this dork. I had to guard them from spoilers for 10 years.
Technically it was 9, but it's still a long time.
Nana over there couldn't be screwed to finish the frickin' game. They kept losing to Luxar's bitch ass.
Because Luxar is a piece of shit. Alright, that entire boss fight was awful.
And they never YouTubed the boss. And I never told them what happened. I said, you're going to have to get to that to yourself. And as a result of that, I had to be the one to protect you for the last decade from this.
Granted, you did a poor job because I kind of got glimpses of what this person was, but I just didn't know it was Alma.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, it's
considering
kind of
how late it
difficult.
was, I thought she was like just somebody that descended from the heavens, said some cool thing, and then the game just ended.
Oh, yeah. I could. I wish I had seen your face when you saw Elma drop to the floor. Her.
It freaked me out, and I like instinctively like called out to her. Yeah, like as if she's a real fucking person. Goddamn. Me when I get too attached to games and its characters and world and lore. Yeah, no. In hindsight, if that's what it looked like when she was transferring, could you imagine what it would have been like if the Lifehold core was just actually like fucked up and everybody just died? That shit would have been freaky. And like, what would happen? Like, what would have happened if it did? Would everybody just go out, or would people just start dying out in mass? Like, first it started out with like one person, and then like 10 people dropped, and then 20 people dropped.
That's
That's
for another topic. But next up, we're going to move on, because I don't have these organized in any order at all. You smug bastard. You
I don't.
son of a bitch. You're hiding things. A lot of things.
I don't know if he's really hiding much of anything, dude.
Okay, well, let me explain this. Mira is like the Tower of Babel, okay? Every being on the planet understands each other's tongue, even when they're from different worlds. Everyone except him. He's the only one who had to learn English. He's the only one that is a single representative of his species, minus Elma. He's the only one who we don't have a proper species name on. He's the only one who doesn't refer to himself as a single person. He refers to himself as we, as though he's like a hive.
Gender.
And then his art book lore just straight up says he's like, Lucifer? Huh? What do you mean?
Granted, I personally don't think there's not much going on. If I would have been more sold on it if his affinity missions played into that, but he's just a salesman the entire time. Nothing in his heart to hearts even suggests this. It just means that his name is just Elcifer or Lucifer. That's just all that it reads to me. This dude is very unremarkable in terms of like what could be going on with him.
That's what you say. And meanwhile, he was like the source of the biggest conspiracy theories in the early days of the X fandom. This dude is the old school equivalent to Riku. What are you hiding?
Bro is just a normal salesman.
Bullshit. You. Elma's boy toy.
It's her wife.
So, the lone hero, the protagonist of the original story of Xenoblade X, the hero of New Tokyo, who got yeeted out of the canon because of a massive rewrite to account for online functionality. And then we're led to believe that he sacrificed himself to save the white whale from the ghosts when they caught up to it after the explosion. And then in the lyrics of In the Forest, we receive more information about what happened. Specifically, we find out, like, we hear the moments that Elma reacts to his disappearance. We find out that, like, he was apparently left adrift in the universe. And we know from the comms lore that, like, in order to get to Mira, the white whale had to drift across, quote, the dark matter sea. So there's, like, an ocean in space of dark matter, and this poor bastard ended up in it. So, like, did he become the Dark Knight because of his exposure to dark matter? Is that the secret? Does everybody who's exposed to dark matter become, like, a Mobius or a Testament-like person? Is that what this is all supposed to be? If that's the case, then, like, how did Lao revive?
Probably because all of Mira is made out of dark matter. Honestly, that's just what I think, though.
I don't think that the entire planet's made out of dark matter, because we know that Elma noticed that the Vita had dark matter in it. And what happened was that the dark matter tainted or corrupted the wildlife in the local environment. That became the tainted enemies race. And the tainted were then hunted down and killed by Telethia the Endbringer. So, this suggests that the dark matter's effects on living beings, or I guess in this case, dead beings, is unnatural and taboo, and something that is horrible. So, that's very interesting. It calls into question what the nature of the Great One is, but that's another discussion point we'll get into. So, there's a lot of angles to go at this from, and they're all potentially interesting. Especially if we assume that Elma and the hero had a romantic connection, because what's interesting is that every single Xeno game has a love story at the core of its narrative. Every single one, except X. We've done best childhood friends, XE1. We've done meeting this weird ethereal person, XE2. We've done the destined star-crossed lovers, XE3. We've done this is your literal God-given soulmate via reincarnation, Xenogears. And then we've done I will be there as you are the most depressed person on the planet because I want to be there for you. I want to share your pain. I want to see you be happy. Xenosaga. Also, the toxic relationship dynamic. Also, Xenosaga. So, like, the only one that I can think of that hasn't been attempted is the dynamic between people of different worlds. Literally, different worlds. That's probably the only romance dynamic that hasn't been attempted in the series that I can think of. So
also the weird Ouroboros-esque kind of spell going on.
Oh yeah.
In the book.
The Skells the Skells look like Ouroboros. What the hell?
I only mention that because it seems as though, at least in Xenoblade 3, every time we get an Ouroboros, it's almost guaranteed, that the two characters that are paired together in said Ouroboros are romantically involved. I think the only exception being Lance and Senna.
Mm-hmm.
But Uni and Tyon and Noah and Mio are very clearly romantically involved with each other. So the same can probably imply for the hero and Elma.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also Lau and his wife, I guess, if you want to go into the whole like aspect
that's
of
like the tragic. I mean, that's the only thing I could think of is that the game attempts, which is tragic, like love and connection. But I'm talking about like something that comes together over the course of the narrative.
Yeah, we don't really see his family at all. We just get names, Charmaine and Shinji.
Mm-hmm. Love is one of the major reoccurring motifs and themes of the Xeno series, so that's something to talk about. Alright, next up is other life holds. Where's this damn image? Where is the image? Where did it go?
Stop panicking. You're fine.
Found it. This is going to require me to zoom in very far. That's NLA. What the hell is that? Okay, so there's a side quest that's been in my brain forever. Apparently. There
I
was...
believe it was the black white hold, or the black life hold. Excuse me.
So, there's a side quest in this game where basically Blade was attempting to establish radio communications, and they found archives or records or whatever, and in those archives, they heard people speaking in French. This suggests that Lynn was right, that NLA wasn't the only ship that managed to escape, that other ships made it out of the disaster. And if that's the case, who's to say they didn't all end up on Mira in the end?
I wouldn't say that they all ended up in Mira, but they're definitely like scattered.
Next up is The Secret of the Lifehold. A very long time ago, a theory video was produced that made an observation that the Lifehold seemed to be powered by or filled with core crystals. Interesting. And if they are in fact core crystals, that suggests a much deeper connection between X and the main timeline. Also, I can hear myself on your device.
Right.
You good now? What? No? Okay. Nana is having technical difficulties, so allow me to continue to talk. So if the life world is filled with core crystals or something that's similar to core crystals, this suggests that it's very similar or connected outright to the story that Klaus posited. He said that core crystals were at one point a supplement meant to replace damaged human brain cells. It's very interesting then that the ganglion are called the growth in Japanese. The growth. And we know that they are basically a slave race created by the Cimmerians being the genetic predecessor species to humanity. So this has some pretty broad implications. Are they called the growth, or like compared to like a cancer because the core crystals exist in this system to replicate humanity, and they're like the byproduct that results from this process? Are the ganglion then like the Guldos in Moritha? Something like that. It's also worth noting that the life hold itself has been infected. Luxar was submerged in the protoplasmic fluid. His genetic material was then dissolved by human DNA. Does this have an implication on what will happen in the future? Does this mean that the ganglion might still continue to exist, or perhaps be a cancer outright onto humanity? If that is the case, then Lao screwed up big time by stabbing this dude and ending up in the water. Another thing that's obviously worth talking about is, how is it that everyone's still alive? If the database is in fact in ruins, then everyone should be dead, right? Well, not only is everyone not dead, but they're all alive, they're all thriving, but even more importantly, the Lifehold was seemingly able to achieve its objective, which is presumably how it is that Lao has survived. At least that's the best explanation we could come up with as of now for how it is that Lao is alive. It's worth noting that in the trailer for XCXDE, if you look at Lao's eyes, they look more human. The eyes in XCX is an important visual motif. No one's eyes look entirely correct. No one's eyes look like how human eyes should look, because they're not true flesh and blood eyes. They're cameras. Cameras that abet a pseudo-biological system in the Mimia zones. Lao's eyes, however, when we see him on the beach, appear as true eyes, meaning that he has been resurrected in his human body. In other words, the Lifehold still achieved its purpose, even without the database. And this gets us into the secret of Mira, which is the next important point of discussion that we have to bring up. What is the secret of Mira? What is it? And I'm just going to bring up another picture again that I've already used, but it's already been used, but it's still just as relevant for this specific point of discussion. And here it is. There's so much to unpack here. Calderos in the art book is specifically stated to be Old Roth. What the hell? So, looking at this, you can see what appears to be possibly dark matter. Does this mean that Mira...
Or the fog.
Or the fog, yeah. Does this mean that Mira is a collection of continents that have been collected in this one specific location? That Mira is not a true planet? That's why it's not on star charts? Is it some sort of space-time anomaly, like Ionios? And then there's the biggest mystery of all. That tower. If you look at this structure here at the top of the planet, we see what appears to be a titanically vast crater that has been dug into the planet. It's a plate-like shape. And at the center of that is a grand tower, which extends far into the atmosphere. Klaus, is that you? It can't be, but it suggests that whoever was on this civilization before had something like the space elevator. Some sort of important place where life and world-altering events occurred. It's also worth noting that it doesn't extend all the way into space. We see it taper off. So if this was a space elevator, was it destroyed? If it was destroyed, then did it rain down on Mira, or did it just become part of the upper atmosphere? If it became part of the upper atmosphere, then why don't we see it in game? Another important point of discussion is, where the hell even is this? There's Primordia. There's Calderos. That's seemingly Noctilum over there. That's seemingly... That's probably Sylvalum here. Where is... What are we supposed to be looking at? That's too green to be Oblivia. So maybe that's Oblivia right there.
Though that would be placed wrong, because Oblivia is directly underneath Calderos, which makes me suspect that this is a very, very, very early concept. But considering that even in the game, it was in an Affinity mission, I think it was called Lionhearted, they state that that was the old kingdom, which means that Mira is just a amalgamation of different planets, but just pieces of it. So with the tower, the reason why we don't see it in the base game is because it didn't merge with Mira yet.
That's one possibility. This could
Seems to be the only one right now.
Could be the literal Tower of Babel, by the way. The biblical myth relating to the story of how in the ancient past all humans used to speak the same tongue. And so they erected a great tower in defiance of God. And God retaliated by basically stripping them of their words, causing the original language to fragment into myriad different languages. Is this tower the secret? Is it, what's keeping this system together? All of these places, they come together because of that. Humans are still alive because of it. Here's my most batshit idea. This is an idea that I have adopted since probably early 2018. That was when I first beat Xenoblade 2. What if Mira is a very special place? Yeah, of course it's a special place, but what if it's a special place because it's where the conduit came from? In 2001: A Space Odyssey, or the whole Odyssey series for that matter, the monolith is a extremely powerful, technologically advanced device that is introduced to species to elevate and fast forward their evolutionary cycle and development of intelligence. In 2001, when the apes made contact with the monolith, shortly thereafter, the first intelligent thought ever was had. The apes learned how to use tools. And from there, they became the dominant creatures on the planet, leading us to the era of space, where they made contact with the monolith once again, to ascend and become a transcendent species. What if Mira, which we suspect is the homeland of the Sumerians, is the true homeland of the conduit? And the Sumerians' godlike powers and strengths came from the conduit. The conduit then, however, eventually left Mira behind, finding itself in Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3's story around another dimension's Earth, presenting itself before humanity at a critical time in order to jumpstart their development forward, thus beginning the Xenoblade Chronicles main timeline story. And when Klaus and his counterpart Zanza finally died, the conduit, which was keeping this delicate system together, returned back to where it came. So, my idea is as follows. All of the weirdness of Mira can be explained by the conduit. The conduit is an advanced, godlike piece of technology that exists to further the development of human civilizations. It was weaponized by the Sumerians in ancient times to create all of the things that we see in the Xenoblade X dimension. And it did a stint in the 1, 2, and 3 dimension before returning home. Its return home is what then triggered the intersection, setting the stage for the events of Xenoblade 3 and Future Redeemed. And this is the secret of how X and the main timeline connect together. This would also, in a matter of speaking, actually make X the main timeline. It's the world that this device actually originally came from. We know that its actual purpose is a meta-universe manifold. In English, it's a way to connect different dimensions together. It would then make the most sense if it made true to its name by quite literally traveling between dimensions, arriving at places in time and history that humanity needs it to in order to further the development. This could also reconcile the differences between the X, main timeline, and Xenosaga universes, because, effectively, it could be wherever it needs to be, whenever it needs to be. It could be in the 1 timeline as the 1, 2, 3 timeline as the conduit. It could be in the Saga timeline as the Zohar. It could be on Mira as the Secret of Mira. That way, all the stories are connected, albeit via different universes, featuring similar elements and storylines and plot elements that thread things together, but also occupying different canons without basically violating each other's rules and conditions and ideas. Takahashi would then basically be able to have his cake and eat it too. A shared multiverse of stories. That's my idea, though. I don't know. I don't know if this pet theory has any basis in reality, but I think that it really is a clean way of explaining what the hell it is we actually are getting here. You have any thoughts on that all?
Nope.
Am I on crack or am I on the ball?
It's up to you to decide. I don't have much to say in regards to that, honestly. It's kind of hard to say when I don't have enough information. I'm not good at making theories.
Do you think it's at least a solid theory?
It has the basis, yeah.
Alright, next up is the mystery of the ova. So, I don't have a good picture. The ova is a virus that exists within the Orpheans. It guides them to an attempt to secure its survival. It is probable that this was what allowed them to survive and thrive on their home planet. The Orpheans describe the ova's effect as a kind of gut feeling inside of them. They view it as something sacred and unique to them. However, during their stay on Mira, the virus was able to bond with the Visagels of Calderos, calling their beliefs into question. And here's where things get interesting. In the distant past, before they began to inhabit the Orpheans, the ova were once a single entity. It floated in the ocean of another world where the Telethia had also lived. The Telethia of Mira then apparently considers the ova impure. and is hostile to Orpheum as a result. This is the most direct link to Xenoblade 1 that exists within XEX. An explicit mention of alternate dimensions and Telethia. This then calls into question what we saw in Future Connected. Are we to interpret what we saw literally? When the Telethia flew into the rift, did it in fact wake up on the other side of the multiverse on Mira? Was that the significance of the Telethia sacrifice? They ended up in another world? Calls into question why it is we don't see more Telethia then. And it also does call into question how the OVA would have made contact with this dimension to begin with.
I think it has something to do with that specific Telethia. Because that one seemed to be more in control of itself compared to the other ones, which were more mindless.
Could it perhaps be Callion's Telethia?
That is something that I kind of have to disagree with, because even Callion and eventually, what was that bitch's name again?
Lorthia.
Yeah, they seem to have ended up losing control in the end as well. So I don't think it's them. It has to be that Telethia at the end of Future Connected. Because we don't see a Telethia in any other, like, Xenoblade game, except for X. So that has to be the same one, and it just grew to an enormous size. Because that one is massive. The Endbringer.
Here's an idea. Is the OVA the scientific way to describe the fog?
Perhaps.
Think about what the fog does in Xenoblade Future Connected. It infects wildlife. It makes them hostile. Is that what that is?
That one also makes it a bit weird, because... I don't know, the Endbringer is very...
We do see what appears to be fog on Mira, by the way.
Yeah, it's weird, because the Endbringer seems to be a little bit more cognizant than normal, and that's what's freaking me out. Like, it's as if it knows what it's doing and know what is and isn't impure, so it attacks it. And it's mostly docile compared to the other Telethia from the previous games, which will basically attack you on sight.
It's worth considering that the Telethia willingly sacrificed themselves to destroy the Fog Rift.
Yeah, that was after, though.
It suggests that the High Entian side still had some degree of sentience after the death of Zanza. It also suggests that whoever this Telethia was, they must have been tremendously powerful.
Though we don't really know a whole lot of Telethia that have that kind of ability, except for Corellian and Lorthia, but they are both very much dead.
Corellian? You mean Callion?
Yeah, my bad. K.
One is the biggest cuck in history, the other is the biggest Chad in history.
I remember when... It's not what I remember when, but it was probably a discussion. Probably everyone thought that Corellian... I said Corellian again. Kellion was probably an asshole, but he actually turned out to be a pretty decent guy. I thought it was pretty funny. Anyways, regardless, I don't think that Telethia is anybody important.
Why is it called the Endbringer?
That's the outlier. The thing is that we don't know any Telethia that would be of that kind of, and that kind of scale at all.
The only Endbringers I know of are Malos and Noah.
Yeah, and they're not Telethia.
Yeah.
It was probably just a name because it is the strongest tyrant in all of Mira. I think the only thing that rivals it is Yogadrift.
Elgadrift is like a multi-solar, like a multi-planetary parasite that goes from
If
planet
anything,
to
that
planet.
one should have been called the Endbringer, but that's besides the point. I think it was just a title given because that's just what the people called it. It can bring the end.
The strongest being of a world.
Yeah.
Just
Like
like
a title. Like, it kind of just loses meaning as time goes on, assuming that X takes place at the ass end of it.
It's like a word that the Nopon used to describe it because they are aware of what happened in 2 and 3.
There's also the fact that, like, at least based off of what Tatsu says in the end of the game, like, it's bigger than, like, legendary Frontier Village big. It could be something that kind of just got lost in history. It kind of loses the original meaning, so the Endbringer is just a title and nothing more.
So it's like a Xenoblade 3 thing where these people are describing ideas and concepts that we know as the audience, but they don't know because they are divorced from their historical context.
Yeah. It just doesn't. There's no high end yet that would really bring into, like, there's no high end yet that would make any sense. The only one that would have made sense is Melia, but that shit has been long debunked.
Speaking of Nopon, this. What the fuck do you know, Potato?
He doesn't know anything.
I'm eyeing you.
He doesn't know anything. He's literally 13 years old. He's just spouting nonsense.
I heard an idea a long time ago that was kind of interesting. In Jak and Daxter, one of the stupid twists of the series is that the precursor race is actually those stupid frickin' weasel bastards that Daxter is.
I'm going to have to forget that.
It's a very, very stupid plot twist that has very little actual meaning. Anyways, basically, the idea went that the Nopon could be something akin to that. The Nopon are very interesting because they lived side by side with human civilization, and yet they're practically a being that never interferes. Ricky is one factor, but, like, the majority of their civilization have very little impact or say on the grander, wider universe and context of events. Like,
Ricky only really just saved the world. That's the most that he's done.
I'm talking about,
Tatsu doesn't.
Nopon weren't there in the space station when Klaus was fucking reality up.
Were they?
They weren't.
Oh.
Nopon weren't involved with the experiment.
At
Nopon
least
weren't
that's right
involved. Nopon weren't involved with the destruction of Earth. Nopon didn't wish for Mobius. They didn't join humanity's wish. And as a result of that, when they arrived in Ionios, they became ageless beings that had no lifespan, trapped in time, which is presumably the exact same fate that befell Melia, Nia, Shulk, and Rex. Anyone who didn't make that wish for Mobius was just trapped in a single moment in time forever. So, like, it's kind of interesting how the Nopon don't... They uniquely stay uninvolved in major events. They probably weren't involved in the reconnection of the reality. It was humanity that had to decide to come together to oppose Mobius to destroy the Endless Now. It was humanity that was largely seen as the burden carrier of the stressful and turbulent relationship between humanity and Blade Kind. Tatsu is even divorced from the central focus of this conflict by being the one that had to invent artificial blades. So, like, he doesn't have the same kind of connection with Poppy that, Rex obviously has with Pyra and Mithra. And in that same fashion, the Napon and Frontier Village, they exist at the top of the world, like just underneath the High Entia. They have these connections that go all the way to the top, yet they just conveniently don't talk about what they actually know to the Homs, to, well, humanity.
They're, at least how I perceive them, they're very unbothered and they just want to go wherever the money goes.
They're very unbothered, which is very strange, because these are apocalyptic circumstances that are surrounding them all the time.
They'll get involved when it's like, if people are gonna die, like Riki did. But Riki, I mean, like, all of them did what was right at the end. It was just that, like, for the most part, they just remain unbothered until it's necessary.
But
if that makes
there's also
sense.
just some kind of vibe about them where it feels like they're a bit more informed than they lead on. Riku is the son of Riki. He's the 7th founder. He was there for the final battle against Alpha. And again, he was there for the final battle against Z. He knew everything the whole time. He just never let anything he never let anything go. Isn't it interesting then that Tatsu just gives a little faint sign that he might know a little bit more than he's letting on?
I think it's something more akin to what I was talking about earlier, how shit kind of just loses meaning over time, because he knows about shit from the past, he just doesn't know enough. Because, like, he'll be that kid in class that, like, listens enough to the history lesson because he thinks it's, like, cool and interesting, but he doesn't listen enough to know the full context of what's going on.
I don't know. Suggests that we should probably listen to somebody else. Maybe some Nopon out there somewhere does actually understand what's going on.
The Nopon Art Sages. They're literally art sages.
The Nopon Art Sages are depicted as like these godlike beings that just play with the Xeno universe like toys.
Because it doesn't affect them. They're outside of the flow. They're not going to actually die if something happens.
I find it very interesting how the Archsages are the presumably most powerful beings in the Xeno universe, minus Trinity processors and gods.
And yet they don't do anything. I don't know. It's just like Nopon are naturally like selfish beings.
Are they the freaking precursors from Space Odyssey?
In
Space Odyssey, the aliens that delivered the monolith, we don't see them, but their influence is all over the place. Just passively observing humanity as it struggles to evolve. It's an interesting idea. Maybe they find us amusing. Next up, the mystery of the radio.
I think it's interesting that there could have been some kind of connection to the radio, because there was like one NPC in the game that talks about how during the end of the world they were all listening to radios as it was happening, seeing what towns and cities and countries got obliterated first. Just something that I was thinking about.
There are only two ways this could be. A unified canon in one universe, or a divided canon spread across multiple universes in a shared multiverse. One or the other.
It's likely that second one. Especially considering Xenoblade 3, you literally see two different universes colliding.
Mind you, they used to be one.
Yep.
All I know is that they mentioned the Earthlight Colonization Project. They mentioned Project Exodus. And they very heavily alluded to the day that the world ended.
There was also the straight up just name dropping Dmitry Yuriev from a completely different like game series.
We find out the 13th, because of course it's the 13th, Ark ship was sent to launch in July. What's significant about July? It's July of 2054 that the world ends in Xenoblade X. Meaning that the Icarus was the code name for the white whale. I feel like it'll be almost like 10 years before we know everything about the mystery involving the radio. There's an opportunity here to talk more about this stuff. Also, this is the most unfitting song possible for discussing the damn radio. Anyways, we don't have enough information, so I'm gonna move on. Next up.
When I find you, Takahashi, when I find you.
Asshole ruined my life. Oh, we discussed about the significance of dark matter out of order. At least we could talk about the
shit is going to overlap, unfortunately.
Anyways, this is the Great One. Who or what is the Great One? What's the true significance of the Vita? Was the Great One in the battle over Earth? Where is he now? Is he dead? If he's dead, then is that why Luxar's in command? Why does Luxar share genetic information with the Great One? Why is it that Luxar is only able to access 30% of the Vita's power? You have any ideas?
Kind of hard to say. I'm more interested in what's going on with the Samarians, and the Samarians are mentioned in like outside material that isn't the main story. Like with the what was that one race that wears the big bodysuits?
The Bogons?
The Hazard. Yeah, they straight up like mention how they were also like slave races under Samar. And that in a side quest near the end of the game, you see their, in air quotes, gods, and is depicting two humans. Which throws everything out the window. And it also, like, it's connected, that they are straight up the ones that made that race to begin with. So it's strange who the Great One could be, but it's likely just straight up a human.
Maybe a human that advocated for ganglion liberation? A saviorite? Excuse me. Not a saviorite. A Sumerian. These fucking terms are similar. And they're also extremely relevant to the overarching deep lore.
So, likely human, they probably created the ganglion just for the sole purpose of... Oh my god, this... computer error. They either created the ganglion for the sole purpose of colonization, I guess, or maybe it was for something else and just shit just went horribly wrong and now they're just a slave race.
I think the ganglion are like the blades before the blades were recognized as individual people by the destruction of the Praetorium. Think about the Blades. They were lived underneath the heel of a Malthus because of the Praetorium. To be a driver, you had to have a license. Your license had to be on file with the Praetorium. To get a core crystal, it had to be processed by a Malthus, removing their genetic data and their uniqueness, thus stunting the Blade life cycle. They were slaves, and that's why Jin and Torna rebelled. Well, it's very interesting that the Ganglion, much like Blades, have a deep, embedded relationship with human genetics. In order for a blade to continue to evolve, it has to interact with human DNA. Because core crystals contain archives of genetic information, which is necessary for when they reach the Titan stage of the life cycle, because when Titans give birth, they give birth to new breeds of species and humanity. That was the new cycle of life that they had created. Ganglion, as slaves, have this relationship with human genetic information. But where Blades needed genetic information in order to continue to evolve, the opposite happens for the Ganglion. In the presence of genetic information, the Ganglion die. They rot away. The roles are reversed. Not the roles. The effects are reversed, but the roles are the same. It's very interesting. Blade Kind had Jin as their advocate. He was a revolutionary. He was a man that was pushed to the brink. He lost everything that a man could lose. And so he made the only choices that he could make at the end of his life. What if the Great One is to the Ganglion what Jin was to Blade Kind? Like this great warrior, this legendary person that believed that the Ganglion deserved better than to exist underneath the heels of the Cimmerians. And so they began revolution to free themselves from their creators. Just like what happened in Xenoblade 2. But where Blade Kind ultimately eventually reached understanding with humanity, they differ still, because for all that we understand, the Ganglion and Cimmerians never did manage to come back together. The Ganglion fear and resent their creators. So much so that they hunted humanity down and tried to wipe out every last one of them. Interesting.
I just think that Samarian, it was a Samarian 100%. Because of the lack of
rogue.
Yeah. Who knows? It might have been fucking the lone hero.
So the lone hero's a Cimmerian.
I mean, granted, like, the humans are descended from Cimmerians, so by definition, they're already Cimmerians. That's why they're hunting them down.
Next up, the war. We know why the Ganglion went to war. But why did the ghosts go to war? Why do the ghosts feel the need to be at conflict with the Ganglion? Why did the ghosts hunt down humanity as it crossed the dark matter sea? Any ideas?
I guess we can play into that whole love story thing for a second. Maybe they didn't like Elma. Probably a princess, who knows? Having googly eyes towards Mr. Ambassador of the military. I don't know.
That'd be certainly a story. Elma is like a monarch amongst their people that went rogue, and so the corrupt government that governs their people just said, we're gonna wipe those bastards out because you like them so much. That could be interesting, I guess. I think what's actually the case is, from what we know from the lyrics of Black Tar, it suggests what might actually be occurring, like when why they're called ghosts. It
Hive mind.
They're like a hive mind that operates by possessing the dead.
Maybe they just need a new food source, I guess.
Maybe they blew up Earth because killing the hell out of Earth would give them a fresh supply of new soldiers, maybe?
That's only if they can possess the soul. But there's a bit of a loophole when it comes to that kind of theory. I was just throwing shit at the wind. I was just thinking about it now. Like, wait, they're gonna need the body if they're going to possess it, and the only way otherwise is unless they literally just took their souls and destroyed it, used it as a vessel.
There's certainly a spiritual side to what's going on in Mira. The Japanese name for Blade is Beyond the Logos Artificial Destiny Emancipator. In English, what that means is that Blade is effectively a organization that is seeking to create an artificial fake future for humanity that exists beyond human ego. Our ego, our soul, our brain effectively died during the destruction of Earth. But somehow or another, our souls continued on as Mimia zones. And this is totally not the lore of Scientology, we promise.
Thank God I probably don't know what that is. That doesn't mean go looking it up right now.
So this is the reason for the war. We have no idea. This goes hand in hand with just the ghosts.
Nobody knows shit. Ghosts are freaky as hell.
Why do they look like Ouroboros?
It's hilarious, actually. Takahashi, when he reuses his ideas, we stand. If ghosts are supposed to be a hive mind, then what the hell is going on with Ouroboros? I mean, we got like a mini hive mind with like 2 people.
Maybe ghosts... Maybe a true ghost can only be constructed by the union of a male and female component? It's very
Perhaps.
interesting that their mothership looks like Origin, by the way.
Actually, that's weird, because, like, granted, like, now thinking about it, like, all of Ionios is just a fucking computer. Nothing is, like, real, essentially. But I was thinking about how, for the most part, if you were to fuse and make some kind of Ouroboros, it was typically of a man and a woman. One of the boss fights was literally of that. But then you have D and J, who are both male.
Mobius.
And they were able to... Go
Both of these
ahead.
seem to be different.
Yeah, that's the outlier there, but for a true one, it needs to be like a male and female one. Unless it doesn't matter for them because the aliens are weird.
Are they actually undead? Like undead aliens? It'd be fucking crazy.
I wouldn't go that far.
Their names could be literal.
I wouldn't say undead, but definitely probably has some kind of parasitic nature similar to the ova. Because parasites aren't exactly alive. They're not living, but they're not dead. They just kind of operate on taking shit over and spreading. Got anything else to say?
Next up is J bodies.
What are you hiding?
Eleonora, what are you freaking hiding? What do you know?
Well, well, whatever the fuck is going on there, it has something to do with Cross, because same thing. It's weird.
Why would you produce fake people?
I think these might have been the photos. I can't speak. Maybe they were just prototype mimiazones?
But if that's the case, why would you still have them in active use?
A backup.
Like a plan B in case humanity did keel over?
Yeah. Because, like, they still function normally. It was just that, like, it was at the cost of memories.
Allow me to point out that the architect of the goddamn white whale was an idiot for how he designed the white whale, the lifehold power system. Why wouldn't it just automatically kick on into backup power? We know who was the architect of the white whale, by the way. It was Van Damme. The entire game is basically his fault.
Again, I know 30 years is a long time to prepare, but
can't prepare for
at the
everything.
Yeah, like, I think they had to kind of figure out the other shit first, and by the time they were probably going to get to that point, you know, the ghosts were kind of knocking at the fucking doorstep, probably Dimitri as well, but that's besides the point.
Very shady shit. Does Nagi even know what's going on here? Does Van Damme know what's going on here?
I would imagine. Listen, this is like government documentation. If you are a part of the government, you know about this, and that includes Elma.
If Elma's in on it, what would she approve of something like this? Or is it another one of those cases of the humans doing shit that she doesn't agree with? This seems kind of messed up. Making fake people and then presenting them as though they are legitimate people to the public.
Maybe they were supposed to be just like some kind of like mindless soldier that you can just control on a whim. Like, you would put these memories into their heads, and obviously they go to the military and these memories, so they have incentive to actually go, just in case there are a large number of individuals who want to not participate, because there are going to be people who don't want to participate in any of what the government has to do with anything.
There's that factor of it, I guess, but if you have the resources to make fake people, why didn't you just use those resources to fit more people on the damn white whale?
Lack of time. I think it was just easier to make fake people, I guess. I don't know, it becomes more fucked up the more you think about it. It's even more fucked up because if
It's
Eleanor
also
knows
it's also
this, because
it's also effed up for people that are J bodies. They're not told of their true nature.
for some fucking reason, but I mean, I guess that would make them go rogue as a result. We don't want any more Laos.
They're kind of like Realians, but the thing is about the Realians was there was a clear difference between humans and Realians, at least politically speaking. This is like more shady because there is no political difference. And this gets
It
even more concerning when we talk about the URTVs. URTVs were being developed on Earth, according to Future Redeemed. That was the whole point of the Saviorite Human Protection Plan. Saviorite is a mistranslation of Salvatore. In Japanese Xenoblade 2, they're called the Salvatores. The Salvatores were Dimitri's faction, the URTVs, the designer babies. Designer babies on Earth did not have human rights. And that's why Dimitri went to war to claim the conduit. So, is the government just suppressing external methods to have ulterior methods for humanity, but it's also contradicting itself with the creation of the J bodies?
possibly.
If that's the case, that's completely messed up. Because like they won't give URTVs human rights, but sure we could give J bodies human rights. So you're guilty of the very thing that you were trying to suppress.
Humans are very complicated species.
They're hypocrites. Also, this music fits perfectly for the notion of the darkness of the ECP board. The true villain of Xenoblade X is not Lao, is not the Ganglion. It's not any weird timey-wimey shit. It's the ECP board. It's always the damn ECP board. And
it's always the government. Never trust the government.
And every single time we learn more about the lore of Xenoblade X, it's like, man, this game's plot really did age well, didn't it? Because you have all those idiots like Elon talking about going to space after they've ruined this rock. Like, wow. It was only the rich, famous people or the useful ones that got to leave. Isn't that interesting? It's almost like Tetsuya Takahashi knew what they were gonna frickin' do. Never trust the government.
If you ever think, oh, the government wouldn't do that, oh, absolutely they would.
We have one final discussion point. Lynn's final comments during the end of the game. Lynn believes that other white whales made it out of the destruction. The art book more or less confirms that that's true. And then Beatrice, she thinks that Earth survived. We see Earth be obliterated, but I mean, if the timeline is one, it somehow came back. So that would mean that on the same day, the Beanstalk is raided by the Saviorites and Dimitri, who is trying to claim the conduit. Meanwhile, the immigrant fleet is fleeing the damn planet with Wilhelm on board. Meanwhile, on the other side of the planet, there is an alien invasion going on between two hostile alien forces that are blowing the planet up. Meanwhile, the white whale is trying to escape during all of this chaos. It really turns into a clusterfuck once you try to put it all together. I mean, I could believe them doing something like that, putting it all together in one place, which would basically mean that the Earth wasn't truly destroyed. It was cut into two parts. Earth would be divided into Bionis and Mechonis as well as all rest. I could believe that, but it is a bit inelegant. And it would also mean that Lynn was telling the truth as far, or like she was foreshadowing future events, that the Earth could be reclaimed. If that's the case, then are we to believe that the light that fell to Earth at the end of Future Redeemed are Elma and the White Whale returning to Earth after the events of the Xenoblade X games? Because I say games because I'd assume that would be the end of the story. It would be the X timeline and the people that survived the destruction by going to space reunifying with the people that survived that were left behind on the planet. That would probably be a good way to, a satisfying way to end the series forever, that after all of these ordeals, humanity was finally able to fully come back together. But I don't know. What do you make of all that?
I don't really have much of a comment on that. It's just we shall see.
We shall see. Alright then. This was a very meaty discussion. We're talking for 2 hours and 16 minutes at this point in time. I guess I will switch the image over to something else. Alright,
My wife.
skip to 2 hours and 16 minutes and 30 seconds, roughly. So that's where you're going to skip to. Hello, welcome back. You skipped all the spoilers. We were talking for like an hour, maybe a little bit more. Man, there's a lot to get through.
Like, what are you, a loser? You didn't just, like, you didn't just finish all the games? Why are you looking at this video?
Ha, ha,
Just play Xenoblade.
Anyways, I'm going to upload this now. And it's probably going to take all night, only for the trailer that may or may not be dropping at 9 a.m., which will just instantly invalidate half the stuff discussed, because wouldn't that be silly? Oh,
Then you're gonna... I mean, you gotta put a physical, like, timestamp on in the video itself, otherwise people are not gonna know when this stopped.
I will just leave it as a pinned comment.
Ah, okay, gotcha.
Because I can't really edit this shit. This has to be uploaded, like, now to end up on YouTube in time. Alright, well, this is Scott, and that was Nana, and, thank you for listening to us ramble for a long time. It was a fun experience, for the most part. Had a lot to dig into, a lot of gripes and nitpicks to nit at. Game's still goated, but, man, there's a lot of jank. There's a lot of story weirdness that needs to be resolved. Should be a good time, because knowing Monolith, they always strive to under-promise and over-deliver.
I love when Takahashi just lies on the internet for funsies.
Remember when he said that 2 was not a sequel to 1? Lamau. And then by the time it came to 3, like, he couldn't lie about that anymore. So he just said, yeah, this is the end of the original storyline.
Yeah, but he could be lying about that too!
I guess. Dude is very good at, like...
He loves spreading misinformation on the internet.
I guess. Yeah. Alright. Well, I will see you guys in the next video, which will be a video documenting my personal story with the original release of Xenoblade Chronicles X. I imagine that will be out in the next couple of weeks. Thank you, and goodbye.
Bye bye.